3 days after I bought an abandoned farm just outside the HOA boundary, a convoy of black SUVs rolled up my dusty driveway. I figured they were lost until the first woman stepped out. She was the HOA president from the neighboring community, dressed like she owned the entire county. Beside her stood a lawyer carrying a leather briefcase and two security guards who never took their eyes off me. Without introducing herself, she placed a stack of papers on the hood of my truck. "I'll make this simple," she said. "Sign these documents, hand over the property, and you'll receive $500,000 before sunset." I stared at her, convinced it had to be some kind of joke. "This farm isn't even inside your HOA," I replied. "Why would you pay $500,000 for land you don't control?" For the first time, her confident smile faded. "Because," she said quietly, "some things buried on that property should never be uncovered." She snapped the briefcase shut, turned toward her SUV, and added one final warning without looking back. "If you start digging, you'll wish you had taken the money." At that moment, I had no idea that buying the cheapest abandoned farm in the county had just made me the biggest threat to the HOA's darkest secret. A week earlier, I never imagined I'd end up owning an abandoned farm. After spending nearly 20 years working long hours in the city, I was exhausted by traffic, noise, and the constant pressure of corporate life. All I wanted was a quiet place where I could start over, grow my own food, and enjoy a slower pace. When my real estate agent showed me the property, I immediately understood why it was so cheap. The farmhouse had broken windows, the red barn leaned slightly to one side, and weeds had swallowed most of the old pasture. Even so, there was something peaceful about it. The land stretched across rolling hills, and the view at sunrise was worth more than the asking price. The agent hesitated before handing me the keys. "There's one thing you should know," he said. "This farm sits just outside the HOA's boundary. Technically, they have no authority here, but for some reason, they've always been obsessed with this place." I laughed, thinking he was exaggerating. He didn't laugh back. Then he told me that in the last 15 years, 4 different owners had bought the farm, and every one of them sold it within months without giving a clear reason. The rumors ranged from endless harassment to strange visitors arriving at night, but nobody could prove anything. I wasn't superstitious, and I certainly wasn't afraid of an HOA that had no legal power over my land. So I signed the papers without a second thought, believing I'd found the bargain of a lifetime. I had no idea the decision would put me directly in the path of people willing to spend $500,000 just to make me disappear. 3 days after moving in, I was repairing the broken fence near the entrance when a white luxury SUV slowly rolled onto my property. The woman who stepped out looked confident, almost as if she expected me to recognize her. "I'm Victoria Langford, president of the Maple Ridge HOA," she said, extending her hand. I shook it politely but couldn't understand why she was there. My farm wasn't part of her neighborhood, and legally, the HOA had absolutely no authority over my land. Instead of introducing the 2 men standing behind her, one dressed in an expensive suit and the other carrying a leather briefcase, she got straight to the point. "I'd like to buy your farm." I smiled. "I just bought it 3 days ago. It's not for sale." She nodded as if she had expected that answer. The man with the briefcase opened it, revealing a purchase agreement already prepared with my property's legal description. Then Victoria calmly said, $500,000. Cash. "We'll wire the money today if you sign before sunset." I stared at her in disbelief. "The farm cost me less than a tenth of that," I replied. "Why would your HOA pay this much for land it doesn't even control?" For a split second, the confidence disappeared from her face. "Let's just say," she answered quietly, "this property has become inconvenient." When I refused again, her friendly smile vanished completely. She folded the contract, looked me straight in the eyes, and said in a cold, emotionless voice, "You won't enjoy living here for very long." As their SUV disappeared down the dirt road, my elderly neighbor, Mr. Harris, walked over from across the fence. His face had turned pale. "You should have taken the money," he whispered. "Because once the HOA wants your land, they never stop." Mr. Harris's warning stayed in the back of my mind, but I refused to believe an HOA could harass someone who lived completely outside its jurisdiction. I was wrong. The very next morning, I found a bright orange notice nailed to my front gate. It claimed my barn violated HOA architectural standards and demanded I remove it within 10 days. I laughed, knowing they had no legal authority over my property, and tossed the notice into the trash. That evening, another surprise waited for me. A black pickup truck was parked just outside my entrance. 2 private security guards sat inside, watching every move I made without saying a word. As soon as I walked toward them, they quietly drove away. The harassment only grew worse. Every morning, I discovered new warning letters taped to my door. Anonymous complaints were filed with the county, accusing me of dumping hazardous waste and raising dangerous livestock, despite the fact that I hadn't even unpacked all my equipment. Someone cut the chain on my entrance gate, and one night my tractor's tires were slashed. Then drones began flying low over my fields, circling the farmhouse for hours before disappearing toward the HOA neighborhood. I installed security cameras, but whoever was behind the harassment always stayed just out of view. It was obvious they wanted me frustrated enough to accept the $500,000 offer and leave. When I reported everything to the sheriff's office, the deputy listened carefully but admitted there wasn't enough evidence to identify the people responsible. As I walked back toward the barn that evening, something caught my eye. The old wooden floor had partially collapsed after the recent rain, revealing a rusty metal hatch hidden beneath decades of dirt. Whatever the HOA was trying so desperately to protect, I had a feeling it was buried directly beneath my feet. The rusty metal hatch stayed on my mind all night. By sunrise, I grabbed a shovel, a pry bar, and a flashlight before walking back into the old barn. The wood around the hatch was rotted, as if someone had intentionally covered it years ago and hoped no one would ever find it again. After nearly an hour of pulling nails and breaking away loose boards, the hatch finally opened with a loud groan. A wave of cold, stale air rushed out from below. Rusted steel steps disappeared into complete darkness. I switched on my flashlight and slowly climbed down. The underground room was much larger than I expected. Thick concrete walls surrounded a narrow chamber that looked more like a forgotten storage vault than a basement. Dust covered everything, but nothing seemed random. Metal filing cabinets stood neatly against one wall, while old wooden shelves held dozens of weathered boxes labeled with dates from nearly 20 years earlier. As I opened the first cabinet, my heart started racing. Inside were original county survey maps, handwritten engineering notes, property deeds, and official boundary records. Some documents carried county approval stamps, while others had bright red markings reading "replaced" and "do not file." None of it made sense. Then I noticed a locked metal box sitting alone on a shelf. Using my pry bar, I forced it open. Inside was a leather journal, several flash drive sealed and waterproof bags, and a stack of photographs showing survey crews placing boundary markers across open fields. In every picture, the same woman appeared beside the workers. Although she looked much younger, I recognized her immediately. It was Victoria Langford, the current HOA president. My pulse quickened as I turned another page of the journal. Whoever had written it described secret meetings, altered survey lines, and pressure from powerful HOA board members to move property boundaries without notifying landowners. If the journal was telling the truth, this wasn't a simple land dispute, it was the beginning of a carefully planned fraud. Just then, I heard footsteps echoing across the barn above me. Someone had entered my property. They weren't looking for me. They were looking for what I had just found. I quickly switched off my flashlight and stood perfectly still beneath the barn. The footsteps above moved slowly across the old wooden floor, stopping directly over the hidden hatch. My heart pounded. Whoever was up there knew this underground room existed. After a few tense minutes, the footsteps faded, followed by the sound of a vehicle speeding away. I waited another 10 minutes before climbing back to the surface. My security cameras had captured a black SUV entering the property, but the license plate was impossible to read. That evening, I carefully examined every document and photograph spread across my kitchen table. The pieces finally started fitting together. Nearly 20 years earlier, before Maple Ridge became an upscale HOA community, Victoria Langford had worked with a private land development company responsible for surveying thousands of acres. According to the journal and the original county maps, the developers had secretly shifted official boundary lines by several hundred feet in multiple locations. Those small changes looked harmless on paper, but together they allowed the HOA to claim dozens of acres that legally belonged to neighboring landowners. Over the years, homeowners unknowingly paid HOA fees on land that had never been part of the community. Property values increased, the HOA collected millions in additional dues, and nobody questioned the records because the original survey documents had disappeared. Except they hadn't disappeared. Someone had hidden every original map, deed, photograph, and journal beneath my barn, preserving the only evidence that could expose the entire scheme. Now everything made sense. The abandoned farm wasn't valuable because of the land itself. It was valuable because it was hiding proof of one of the biggest property frauds the county had ever seen. The $500,000 wasn't an offer to buy my farm. It was a desperate attempt to buy my silence. As I reached for my phone to call the county surveyor the next morning, headlights suddenly lit up every window of the farmhouse. This time, the HOA president hadn't come with paperwork. She had come with a plan to make sure those documents never left my property. Instead of opening the front door, I quietly slipped out the back of the farmhouse with the journal, flash drives, and original survey maps packed inside a waterproof backpack. Before Victoria Langford could reach the porch, I called the county sheriff's office and the county surveyor, telling them I had uncovered evidence of a large-scale property fraud. Within 30 minutes, patrol cars and county officials arrived. Victoria greeted them with a confident smile, insisting I had stolen fake documents and was trespassing in a restricted records vault. The county surveyor ignored her and carefully examined the original maps. His expression changed almost immediately. "These are the missing master surveys," he said. "We've been searching for these for nearly 20 years. Using the coordinates marked in the journal, investigators located several original survey monuments still buried beneath the fields surrounding my farm. Every measurement matched the old records, not the boundaries the HOA had been enforcing for years." Victoria's confidence disappeared. She demanded everyone stop digging, claiming the investigation was illegal, but it was too late. Deputies recovered more evidence, including buried boundary markers and official county seals that had been reported missing decades earlier. By afternoon, the sheriff's office obtained a warrant to search the Maple Ridge HOA office. Computers, financial records, and board meeting files were seized. Standing beside her lawyer, Victoria realized the game was over. She was placed in handcuffs on charges related to evidence tampering, fraud, and conspiracy. As deputies escorted her toward a patrol car, she turned and glared at me. "You should have taken the money," she muttered. I simply smiled. "No," I replied. "You should have buried the truth somewhere else." At that moment, every homeowner watching knew the HOA's reign of intimidation had finally come to an end. Over the following months, the investigation uncovered far more than anyone had expected. Forensic auditors confirmed that the Maple Ridge HOA had spent nearly 2 decades collecting fees and controlling land it never legally owned. Several former board members were questioned, while county officials began correcting property records for dozens of affected homeowners. Victoria Langford resigned before her trial, but it didn't save her. She and several accomplices were formally charged, and the county permanently revoked the HOA's authority over the illegally claimed land. Families who had fought for years to prove their property lines were finally given justice, and many personally thanked me for refusing the $500,000 offer. As for the abandoned farm, it became exactly what I had hoped for, a peaceful place to build a new life. Every time I looked across the fields, I remembered the choice that changed everything. They thought $500,000 would buy my silence. Instead, it exposed one of the biggest HOA scandals the county had ever seen, and proved that the truth buried underground was worth far more than any amount of money.